Can I let you in on a little secret? I'm not very smart. If there was any intelligence left in my hollowed out brain husk, then I wouldn't be making this video. Arcane is one of the most beloved animated series of all time. Season 2 has come with its fair share of criticisms, but I don't think that's ruined the show for most people. A flawed masterpiece is what I hear most often. And as far as Season 1 goes, I had trouble finding even the slightest criticism. Hence the thing about me being stupid, because it is my unfortunate belief that both Season 1 and 2 of Arcane are very poorly written. I would like to apologize in advance and ask for your mercy upon this humble soul. In other words, please don't hurt me. But before we begin, I want to clear up a few things. First of all, I am not trying to make anybody angry on purpose. And even if I was trying to make people angry on purpose, I really don't think that Arcane would even function as rage bait. I think most people would just look at me as some guy screaming in the corner and think, is he okay? Which, fair. But at least I am trying to be sincere in the things that I scream. Second, if you really like Arcane, then there is no reason for you to watch this video. I really don't like the idea of taking away from someone else's enjoyment of a show. Just because I have really strong opinions against Arcane does not mean that I want other people to stop liking it. I promise that I'm not trying to use my intellectual prowess to prove that your favorite show is actually bad. The reason I don't like Arcane is because there are certain flaws that mean more to me than they would to somebody else. There's a reason that my friends voted me most similar to Heimerdinger. I tend to think too deeply about things and then also say words like preposterous.
Very interesting.
The real reason that I'm making this video is because I kind of feel like a crazy person for not liking Arcane, and I just want to see if there's anyone out there that actually agrees with me. So, without further ado, it's time to make a fool of myself. Oh, and huge spoilers, obviously. Let's start with the good. I'm a pretty firm believer that you cannot properly criticize something without first talking about its strengths. I won't be spending very much time on this though, because there are plenty of very talented creators that have already talked about what Arcane does well. So, just to name off a few strengths in particular, the animation in Arcane is obviously incredible. I don't really need to say much on the animation, I think it speaks for itself. There are scenes in Season 2 that are actually jaw-dropping in how good they are. If someone told me that they were just watching Arcane for the visuals and nothing else, then I would find that completely fair. It is very easy to tell that the ginormous animation budget was actually used for the animation, and was not in fact used as a tax write-off, as is often the case these days. Although not always to my subjective tastes, the music in Arcane is very well put together and very well utilized. There are times where it actually feels like the music was tailor-made for the scene that it's being used in, and there are other times where it actually was. Regardless of my tastes, I am just as much a fan of Heimer's one-man band as the next person is. And I too find it very cool when every episode opens with the voice acting is very professional across the board, and some standouts in particular really do a pretty amazing job. I think my personal favorite is Victor, especially after he turns into Megatron.
I am pleased to see you.
I don't think there was a single voice actor throughout the entire show where I thought, that doesn't sound right. Which is a very hard thing to do. And I just mean in general, not because I have snobbish tastes. I mean, I watch Jackie Chan in dubbed sometimes, for crying out loud.
So, you're the Asian Hawk.
That's right.
But we're in Europe.
The world of Arcane is pretty unique as far as fantasy worlds go. They obviously had some help because they could draw from League lore, but that doesn't take away from the fact that it's a well-crafted world. Lastly, there's a lot of thought given to the smaller details in Arcane. Easter eggs and setups are very common throughout the show, and it will consistently reward you for paying close attention. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm not exactly the smartest tool in the shed, so there are little details that I tend to miss. Even after taking such extensive notes, I'm sure that there are some aspects of the show that I will get wrong or present incorrectly. I promise that any misinformation I give is not intentional. Anyway, you get the picture. Arcane has a lot of strengths, which is why it's so frustrating to me when it comes to particular aspects of the writing. There's a lot of missed potential. Speaking of, I think it's time we get to the criticisms. For me, the biggest flaws in Arcane's writing boils down into two major problems, both of which are very closely tied to each other. The first is something that I will refer to as cool writing, and I know that that is a very counterintuitive name, but it is all that I could think of. The writing in Arcane is centered around cool individual moments. Moments that you could watch in a YouTube clip and go, wow, what a cool show that must be. The problem is, the writers don't always know how to get to these moments in a way that makes sense. The individual moments are fine, but the part that goes in between is where things get a little tangled up. And by a little tangled up, I mean incredibly, massively, disgustingly tangled up. The most common way that Arcane will achieve these cool moments, even when it otherwise doesn't know how to, is through writing shortcuts. Poor pacing, contrivances, emotional strong-arming, things that you wouldn't necessarily notice right away, but definitely make the scenes feel like they weren't earned or respected. For me personally, even if a scene is really cool, it only remains cool if the context surrounding it actually makes sense. When Arcane has narratively written itself into a corner, but still needs a certain scene to happen, it will often just force its way through by any means necessary. This is the writing equivalent of jamming a round peg into a square hole. Only in this case, since they wrote the show, it's more like they handcrafted a square hole only to jam the round peg in anyway because they didn't like the look of the square one. I'll be giving plenty of examples of this later, but for now I'll give one quick example. In Season 2, Heimer says this to Echo.
I must say that since I've met you, lad, I've truly lived. What?
He then sacrifices himself to get Echo back to his original reality. This, in isolation, is a very emotional scene. We all like Heimer, so it's obviously sad when he vaporizes himself. The problem with this is, Echo and Heimer have barely any screen time together before this happens. In fact, in Season 1, they have a grand total of 2 scenes together. In Season 2, they only have 1 episode before they go on their grand alternate reality adventure. The episode in which Heimer tells Echo that he changed his life is the most we've ever seen them together. If you truly want me to believe that Echo was one of the most important driving forces in Heimer's 300-plus-year-old life, then you're going to have to convince me of that. It doesn't feel like this scene was earned because the relationship we're told that they have is not shown to us, at least not properly. I'm sorry, but 1 scene of Heimer blowing bubbles for children is not enough. If Echo truly had this significant of an impact on Heimer, then I'm going to need to see something significant in the story. And if that was all, then maybe it wouldn't be such a big deal. Sure, it's rushed, but so are a lot of things in media. What really seals it for me is what comes afterwards. Did you know that the scene in which Heimer vaporizes himself is the last time that he's mentioned in the entire show? I mean, poor Heimer. He goes out in the most selfless way possible, and no one even bothers to remember that he exists after this. At the end of the show, Echo even mourns Jinx's death, but doesn't mourn Heimer for some reason. Echo only burns 1 piece of paper, and I'm fairly confident that Heimer's name is not the one he put down. Unless, of course, for some reason he put 2 names on 1 piece of paper and he's just grief-maxing. So, we have a very impactful scene that was neither properly built up to, nor mentioned ever again after it happens. It's neither earned nor respected. It's just a moment in time that the show needed to have happen. It does make for a very emotional YouTube clip, though. I'll be giving more examples of this later, but for now I want to move on to my second criticism, which is the inconsistent character writing. When Arcane tries to force a particular scene, it's often at the cost of its characters. The characters in Arcane will seemingly change their core beliefs on a whim, usually in service of either creating conflict or moving the plot along. These major character changes are given little to no explanation and are very rarely reflected on. You will now be shown a picture of Jayce's face for no reason in particular. Now, just to clarify, when I'm talking about an inconsistent character, I don't mean a conflicted character. Jinx, for instance, is very conflicted all throughout the show, but that makes sense for her character. Jinx is shown to struggle severely with both guilt and with her mental health. There are many scenes that portray Jinx as having hallucinations or feelings of guilt over the past. She's established as a character that has a lot of internal conflict, and we're shown evidence of why that is. So when she changes her mind seemingly out of nowhere, it might be a surprise to the audience, but it's not out of character. At least most of the time, but we'll get to that. Inconsistency for Jinx's character would actually be the opposite. If Jinx were to wake up one day and not have any mental health struggles, then that would be inconsistent for her character, which surely doesn't happen. If Jinx were to suddenly put on a suit and tie, go to an office job, and say, "Nice weather we're having," that would be off-putting for us as the audience. It would make sense for some people, but it wouldn't make sense for Jinx. And that's what I mean by inconsistent character writing. Thankfully for me, because the two biggest problems that I have with Arcane's writing are so closely tied to each other, I can tackle both just by talking about a few major characters. I won't be going over every scene and every plot hole. One, because I don't think I need to do all that to show my argument, and two, because that's not the point. I think that arguments around media tend to get very nitpicky, and I want to try and keep this in the bigger picture if I can. That's not to say that I won't nitpick, just that I'm going to try not to. Instead, I'll be analyzing 4 major characters and the plot points that they relate to. So, with all that out of the way, let's start with a character that's more inconsistent than my ability to do the splits. Jayce. Jayce is a pathetic little baby man who doesn't know what he wants, but still somehow manages to cry when he doesn't get it.
Don't be a baby, Luigi!
I could probably end things off there if I wanted to, but that wouldn't really be much of an analysis. To put things differently, Jayce is the embodiment of inconsistent character writing. There are times where I even really hesitate to call him a character. He's more like a tool that the plot uses to get where it needs to be. Jayce's character changes constantly because he doesn't have a core set of beliefs, morals, ideals, or aspirations. He's just whatever the writers need him to be in whatever scene he's in. I actually went through the show keeping a tally of the number of times that Jayce has a major character change seemingly out of nowhere. The final tally that I came to was 15. 15 times. I mean, come on, dude. Even one major character change can do massive damage to a show's writing if it's not handled properly, but Jayce literally scoffs at that. He would never put in such rookie numbers. Obviously, I won't be talking about all 15, but let's talk about some of the important ones. Jayce begins Arcane as a character that will do anything to achieve his dream of creating hex tech. He does experiments illegally and talks back to the council when he thinks that they don't believe in his research. This ends with Jayce breaking into the academy with Victor and proving his theory. Then we get a time skip. After the time skip, Jayce is now the opposite. He is very concerned about the safety of Hextech and supports Heimerdinger in his caution. This is shown by Jayce delaying the presentation of his new inventions until they can be properly tested, which is following Heimer's advice. Jayce also votes to shut down the Hex Gates after Jinx bombs Enforcers as a precaution against misuse. Although it is strange that Jayce's character does a 180 during the time skip without showing us why, it's not that big of a deal on its own. Just take note of it and know that Jayce's character is now someone that puts safety first and supports Heimer. The next bit of character development that we get is when Jayce goes to a show with Mel. Mel tries to convince Jayce to participate in the political side of Piltover.
I tightened our security.
And in so doing, put a target on your back. You've just made yourself everyone's common enemy, Jayce.
Jayce then says that he's uncomfortable with that and that he never wanted to be a part of politics. Mel then says that he can craft his own destiny and that he should do it so that he proves to others that he can. Jayce looks conflicted for about 3 seconds, and then he turns around and is the smoothest diplomat the world has ever seen. I'm not even kidding, by the way. That's exactly how this scene plays out. Look at this.
I never wanted anything to do with politics. You pushed this on me.
The council assumes you'll fail. Time to prove them all wrong.
You know, Councilor Madara's right. The Hex Gates are only the beginning. We're currently looking for new partners in our Hextech research.
We then get a montage of Jayce negotiating special exceptions for the other counselors regarding the Hex Gates. It's never really explained why Jayce changes his mind instantly here. We're kind of left to assume that it's because he likes Mel.
Hextech partners.
Has a nice ring, doesn't it?
Which could, if developed, be a fair character motivation. He changed his mind about putting safety first and participating in politics, but he's in love. Fine. Our next bit of development is where things start to become a little much for me. Jayce realizes that Victor is terminally ill. This obviously makes Jayce very stressed out because Victor is one of his closest friends. Jayce and Heimer then argue over using the Hex Core to save Victor. Heimer argues that the Hex Core needs to be destroyed because of how dangerous it is. When Jayce refuses to destroy the Hex Core, Heimer responds by saying that he will have it done one way or another. Now, even though this change in Jayce's priorities does happen very quickly, in this case it makes perfect sense. Your closest friend dying would obviously be a big motivating factor for anybody. At least for now. What doesn't make sense is how Jayce handles the aftermath. Heimer goes in front of the council and starts saying that the council needs to hold each other accountable, that they've lost their way. Jayce steps in and argues that the people have been unsafe under Heimer's leadership and that action needs to be taken immediately to deal with Zaun. He then convinces the council to vote Heimer into retirement, which is something that he is able to do because of his earlier negotiations. I have a few problems with this scene. First of all, the premise is a bit confusing to me. Jayce and Heimer talk as if they are referring to the Hextech tools that Jayce made and not the Hex Core. Heimer mentions that Jayce's Hextech projects need more time.
Your Hextech projects need more time, more safeguards.
And Jayce's arguments revolve around keeping the people safe from Zaun.
Shimmer is rampant in the Undercity. Attacks at the Hex Gates and in the Academy Square. Enforcers fear to set foot in the lanes. All under your watch.
Jayce's sudden change in priorities happened because of Victor's illness, but when it comes time to confront Heimer on that, they end up talking about something completely different.
It's that thing. It must be destroyed.
No, I won't let you.
I will have it destroyed one way or another. Your Hextech projects need more time.
Of course, it could be that Jayce is basically using his projects as an excuse to the council, but why would Heimer fall for that? He's already seen the Hex Core and swore to destroy it. So why is Heimer acting like he doesn't know what's going on here? Why doesn't he just say, yo, this guy Jayce has a death cube? And beyond that, even if Jayce is using his Hextech projects as an excuse to keep the Hex Core safe, why would that even make sense to begin with? How does putting the Hextech tools in the hands of the people keep them safe from Zaun? So far, we've only been shown tools intended for construction and mining. Weapons haven't even been discussed yet. And we know that Jayce doesn't have weapons in mind at this point because Mel is the one that comes up with that idea in a later episode. And that's treated like a huge revelation.
We should prepare our own countermeasures.
You want us to build weapons? Absolutely not.
And even if you ignore all of this, there is a much bigger problem. Why does Jayce kick Heimer off the council? I mean, don't you just need majority vote? Isn't that the literal point of it being a council? If Jayce has the council under his thumb and can convince them to kick Heimer out despite their reluctance, then it would be easy to outvote Heimer on anything, including the Hex Core. I mean, Jayce and Victor continue to work on the Hex Core after this, so clearly the council doesn't care that much about it. Trying to outvote Heimer rather than kicking him off would also be in line with his character because Jayce has been shown to respect Heimer up until this point.
The council has recommended you give the Progress Day speech this year.
But you always give that speech. I could never take your place.
When Heimer originally talks about destroying the Hex Core, Jayce says this.
That's your opinion. We'll see if the council agrees.
So why are you voting to kick out your mentor rather than voting to keep the Hex Core? Heimer and Jayce have argued literally one time since the time skip, and it was over this issue. He even regrets his decision shortly after in a conversation with Mel.
He was my mentor, Mel, and I betrayed him.
So why did you vote him off then? And if you want to try and argue that Jayce kicked Heimer off the council because he believed that Heimer would not give up on destroying the Hex Core, I have problems with that logic. First of all, if Jayce truly respected Heimer as his mentor, then he would have tried everything he could first and left kicking him off the council for a last resort. Second, clearly Heimer was not as determined as he said he was, because after this scene, he immediately goes to Zaun and completely forgets the Hex Core ever existed. Or at least until Season 2, but by then, the damage is already done. I guess when Heimer said one way or another, he just forgot about the another part.
One way or...
I can tell you the actual reason that Jayce does this is because the writers need a reason for Heimer to go down to Zaun. That way he can meet Echo and learn about the true meaning of life, only to be obliterated shortly after. This also serves the purpose of getting Heimer out of the picture so that the show doesn't have to worry about him every time that something Hextech related happens. Heimer can't live in Zaun if he's on the council, so in comes Jayce. For me, this is the first major example of the plot messing with Jayce's character so that events will go in a very specific direction. I mean, sure, Jayce has had some rapid changes before this episode, but this goes beyond that. In this scene, Jayce is not a character, he's a tool, which actually serves as a double meaning if you're familiar with slang from 50 million years ago. Let's move forward in time a bit though, since this might just be a one-time thing. It's not, by the way. By the time we reach our next big council scene, Jayce is now full warmonger mode due to his fear of Zaun. He really wants to get Hextech weapons approved because of a picture he drew of himself holding a hammer as a child. This is when Vi and Caitlyn go in front of the council to talk about dealing with Silco. Now, when we get to the other characters, I will be coming back to this scene in particular because it is a mess of a scene for multiple reasons. But for right now, just know that Jayce is fully on board with making Hextech weapons and going to war with Zaun. The rest of the council, including Mel, who came up with the idea of Hextech weapons in the first place, are against it. And I mean literally everyone, the entire council.
You don't know war. I do. It must be our last resort.
She's right.
The council feels that negotiating would be better and that war is too dire of a first approach, which makes perfect sense. Jayce and Vi, unhappy with this decision, take Hextech weapons and attack a base run by Silco. During the fight, Jayce accidentally EQ combos a child and kills him. After this, Jayce immediately does a 180 and says that war is no longer an option.
We're done here.
We haven't even scratched the surface. Silco's still out there.
Do you not understand? I am part of this now.
This is an extremely quick turnaround. Keep in mind that Jayce's character has been building up to this moment for 4 entire episodes. He was gung-ho about war not moments ago.
I'm sorry, Professor, but healing this city will take more than just speeches.
We agreed Hextech was to improve lives, not to take them.
We may not have a choice. We've been talking about talking for weeks now. They're still cleaning the blood off the bridge. When do we say enough is enough? We're done here.
Jayce has mentioned several times that there will be sacrifices in dealing with Zaun, but that it needs to happen anyway. But then at the first casualty, he just backs down completely. Now, I will give the show some credit here. Obviously, thinking about war and witnessing war are two very different things. Accidentally killing a child would mess up almost anybody. Unless you are Vi, but we will get to that.
One dead kid?
It's a very abrupt change, but if developed correctly, it could make sense for his character. The key word being if. There will be a lot of that going forward. Moving on to the next scene, Jayce immediately goes to Silco without telling the council and negotiates a deal. During this negotiation, he says this.
Today I got a glimpse of what war between us might look like. Your people wouldn't stand a chance. The council couldn't care less. Council couldn't care less.
Jayce, what are you talking about? Did you black out yesterday? Not 1 episode ago, you were so hyped up at the idea of murdering Zaun that you tried to film an episode of the A-Team. The council were the ones that were telling you to stop. This scene is just straight up lying to the audience.
Council couldn't care less.
It must be our last resort. There may be a diplomatic solution.
I'm trying to save you from annihilation.
Of course, you could argue that Jayce was lying on purpose to apply pressure, but that also doesn't make sense. Silco literally says that the deal came with basically no strings attached.
All we ever wanted. The boy didn't even haggle.
If Jayce was trying to apply pressure, then he failed miserably. And even if Jayce is lying, his character changes need to be acknowledged in some way by the show. Jayce has changed his core viewpoints several times already, and he never stops to reflect on it. Some of this could be somewhat justified if there was even just one scene of Jayce realizing how different his opinions are compared to episode 1, or even compared to last episode for crying out loud. But No time for that. We have a cool scene quota to fill. Speaking of, after talking with Silco, Jayce goes in front of the council with his negotiated deal, pretending like he never even voted for war in the first place. Since Jayce did a horrible job, though, the council now feels like Zahn is asking for too much. This is kind of strange, considering that the council was hoping for a negotiation only yesterday, so everyone just kind of switched sides, I guess. It's almost like last episode never happened. Of course, off-screen, they somehow managed to come to a resolution. We're never shown what Jayce says to the council to convince them, but thankfully it happens just in time for Jinx to launch a rocket into the council building. What a climactically relevant coincidence. Let's zoom out for a second. Can we talk about how contrived a series of events this is? Jayce wants war, so the council doesn't want war. Jayce kills a child, so now he is sad. Jayce wants to negotiate, so now the council doesn't want to negotiate. Oh wait, they figured it out off screen, but now a missile blew them up. All of this happens in 2 episodes. The problem with this is, the characters feel like they are acting in whatever way will create the most conflict in that particular scene, rather than acting in a way that makes sense for their character. This results in the characters lacking consistency. Jayce and the council act like different people between one episode compared to the next, with very little, if any, context given. And the context that is given is not nearly enough to justify these massive turnarounds. I'm surprised my neck didn't snap from all the narrative whiplash I experienced. Now, you may have picked up on a bit of frustration directed at Jayce. I mean, can you blame me? I want to be clear that my frustration is not at the people who like the show. My frustration comes from a perfectly usable storyline that is shred to pieces out of a need for drama and a climactic ending. If the writers had taken their time and not created conflict out of nothing, Jayce's character could have made sense. Sadly, this is just the beginning, because now it is time to talk about Season 2.
You don't want to see me angry, do you?
Do it.
At the start of Season 2, Victor gets hit by the missile shot by Jinx and nearly dies. Jayce saves his life by using the Hex Core, thus creating Cool Victor. This goes against the promise that Jayce made at the end of Season 1, where he promised to destroy the Hex Core. As far as development goes, this actually can make sense. Jayce promised not to use the Hex Core, but when he saw Victor in actual danger, he felt like he couldn't keep that promise. That is a very human thing to feel. Unfortunately, Jayce is not a human. He is a soggy rag dunked in a bucket of narrative floor water. While Victor is in a coma, Jayce speaks with Mel. Jayce tells her that he is against the idea of making Hextech weapons because he promised Victor that he wouldn't. I'm not really sure why this is the promise that he's reflecting on when he just broke a different one not moments ago, but just take note of the fact that Jayce is against making weapons.
She's already gotten her hooks into Sallow, using his grief to make a play for Hextech.
Mel, I promised Victor. Never again.
After this, Victor wakes up and argues with Jayce over using the Hex Core. Victor tells Jayce that they need to go their separate ways and leaves for Zahn. Now, your closest friend has just left and might never come back because of a promise that you broke. What do you do? If you answered, "Look for my friend and talk it out," then congratulations. You are a normal human. If you responded with, "Make Hextech weapons as soon as he is gone," then I have a feeling that you and Jayce would get along very well. Jayce ends up making Hextech weapons in the very same episode that he specifically says he won't do exactly that. Look at these 2 clips.
Mel, I promised Victor. Never again.
Got a few surprises of our own.
You are made of stupid.
When you play those 2 clips without context, they feel like they are from completely different parts of the show. But there is no context. Both of these clips are from the same episode, and no explanation is given as to why Jayce changes his mind. I mean, I swear he's just lying for the fun of it at this point. The only scene that could even remotely be considered context is when Jayce tells Caitlyn that Hextech weapons might be necessary. But it's never explained why or how Jayce changes his mind when he was so against Hextech like 3 minutes ago. Jayce must have record-breaking trauma recovery skills because he sped-run getting over that kid's death. He is now in full support of fighting Silco again, only this time with handcrafted upgrades for the most efficient accidental child deaths possible. Now, it should be noted that during this episode, Jayce does have his first genuine moment of self-reflection. When arguing with Victor, Jayce says this.
You think it's so easy? To turn your back while your whole city looks to you for salvation? To cling to principles while your best friend bleeds out in your arms? I never asked for this!
This may in fact be the understatement of the century. Jayce's problem is not that he has trouble sticking to his principles. Jayce's problem is that he doesn't have any principles. Jayce seemingly changes his core beliefs depending on what day of the week it is. Oh, it's raining outside? I guess I hate war then. I had toast for breakfast? You know, suddenly I no longer feel so bad about killing that child.
Exactly the sort of thing we wanted to fix with Hextech. Things that will bring an end to your hardships, whether you're the scion of our high houses or an honest laborer from the underground.
I promised, Victor. Never again.
Improving lives, solving real issues.
Jayce's character changes constantly, sometimes happening multiple times in the same episode. And yet, aside from this one line, and maybe one line at the very end, he never seems to acknowledge any of it. It's like Arcane can't or won't acknowledge how meaningful these changes should be. I'm sorry, but Jayce saying one time that he has trouble knowing what to believe in is not a free pass to write whatever you want. Conflict can be written well, like with Jinx, but Jayce just feels more like his brain goes through a wind turbine between every scene. That's enough of a tangent. Let's get back to the story. The next set of events comes after Jayce gets sucked into an alternate timeline. Strangely enough, no one really seems to talk about how Jayce has gone missing. The only character that mentions him at all is Mbessa, and after Jayce later returns, the only people that even acknowledge he was ever missing to begin with are these random background extras. Then again, I suppose I would also try to forget Jayce existed if he ever went missing, so what do I know? And to be fair, I'm sure that Mel would have reacted to Jayce's disappearance if she hadn't also disappeared and coincidentally reappeared at the exact moment that Jayce did. It's pretty amazing that they both struggled to escape their respective prisons for years and yet somehow managed to overcome them at the exact same time. It must be fate. Anyway, Jayce comes back from his alternate reality field trip and is clearly mentally unwell. He then immediately goes to Victor and blasts him in the chest with an energy cannon. Not a single word of dialogue is spoken between them. I honestly don't even know where to begin with this, so let's just finish adding all the context first. After being one-shot by Jayce, Victor goes crazy and starts trying to turn humans into Hextech. Victor shows up in a new form trying to reason with Jayce, and Jayce fights with him in self-defense. It should be noted that during this scene, Jayce blames Victor for giving the people Hextech. It should also be noted that after Jayce succeeds in fending off Victor, his mental struggles disappear entirely. He no longer has his alternate reality headaches, and he acts completely reasonably in every scene going forward. Jayce also retakes his place as leader of the people, despite presumably having been gone for years. No one seems to bat an eye at his sudden return to prominence. Personally, if my leader came back looking like this, I probably wouldn't follow him, but each to their own. At this point, the war begins, and Jayce goes to shut down the Hex Gates. This ends up being pretty pointless, as Victor just uses the Force to turn them all back on. Victor then jet propels Jayce up to the top of the building so that he can get front row seats to the end of the world. That's where Jayce enters Victor's Mind Palace. It is then revealed that Victor, from the Old Man timeline, gave Jayce the task of stopping his other self. Victor was the one that gave Jayce the rune all the way back in Season 1. Old Man Victor had tried many different runes across many different timelines, but this was the only rune that ended up working. Jayce then convinces Victor to stop what he is doing by saying that he wants his old partner back and that Victor's terminal illness is what made him beautiful.
You've always wanted to cure what you thought were weaknesses. Your leg, your disease, but you were never broken, Victor. There is beauty in imperfections.
Then Victor and Jayce join minds and stop the world from ending. Okay, that was a lot. Let's go back and analyze this series of events. To start with, why does Jayce blast Victor with an energy cannon? No, really, can someone please explain to me why this happened? Victor is supposed to be Jayce's closest friend, but Jayce just waltzes in, murders the guy without saying a single word, and then leaves without even shedding a tear. For Jayce, this moment is treated with the same emotional significance as if it was on his to-do list right before picking up groceries.
You're alive. You're alive.
Jayce doesn't reflect on Victor's death at all, really. And then he isn't even surprised when it turns out that Victor is still alive.
Victor. How did you get in here?
It feels like he already knows that Victor isn't going to die. But if that's the case, then why did he leave after not accomplishing anything? It actually makes things worse because this ends up turning Victor into a crazy robot overlord and pushes him to become more powerful. No matter how you slice it, he should care about this moment. And why does Jayce just go straight to murder time to begin with? If he really does consider Victor to be his friend, then why doesn't he try other options first? It's not until much later, when Jayce enters Victor's mind palace, that he even tries to convince Victor with words. But that only comes after Jayce is cornered and has no other option. Doesn't that just make Jayce a giant prick? Shouldn't the order be reversed? Why doesn't Jayce try to convince Victor when he's pro-humanity? Why does Jayce blast first and ask questions later when Victor is supposed to be one of the most important people in his life?
I didn't realize he was so close.
He's like my brother. All I want is my partner back.
It would have been so easy to write this too. Just have Jayce try to reason with Victor first, have Victor say no and go crazy, and then have Jayce blast him once he feels like there's no other choice. Why didn't they do that? Don't ask me. If I felt like the show was well written, I wouldn't be making this video. If you take the actual order of events, Jayce blasts his friend, and then only after realizing that murdering his way through the problem won't work, he just says, "No, but we're friends though." Is that not crazy? What kind of friend uses an energy cannon as their go-to, and then normal conversation is their backup plan? And on that note, why does Jayce even believe old Victor in the first place? Because his timeline was destroyed? What if old Victor caused his timeline to be destroyed on purpose, and he's trying to get Jayce to do the same thing to his timeline? I mean, that's quite literally almost what happens due to Jayce's actions. Jayce just automatically believes the Victor that destroyed their own timeline over the Victor that has been his closest friend since childhood. It's almost as if Jayce has read the script. And yes, Jayce is shown to be struggling mentally when he leaves the alternate timeline. There's even a scene where Victor implies that old Victor's will has followed Jayce.
That isn't Jayce, but there is another will at work within him.
But there are two problems with this. One, Jayce shows restraint when facing this child, which implies that he has some semblance of reason left. And two, Jayce loses his timeline headaches almost immediately. There is only one other scene in total where he is shown with a headache. So you're telling me that Jayce is just magically crazy long enough to spark blast Victor, and then he coincidentally goes back to normal right after? Eating magical lizards does not excuse this behavior. And if Victor's will is supposed to be with you, then why did it stop? You're far from done in saving the timeline. In fact, things were just made significantly worse. And what is Victor's will anyway? What's the plan here? Why did it become so needlessly convoluted? Couldn't he have just told Jayce to try and reason with his other self? Victor talks about valuing humanity in the very same episode that Jayce destroys him.
But he isn't a specimen. He's a man, and he needs my help.
I will not sacrifice his humanity for your cause.
It's not until after Jayce betrays him that he changes his mind.
The world I now see
Is more lucid than ever.
If Victor could be convinced in evil mode, then couldn't he be convinced more easily in human-loving mode? And if you want to try and convince me that somehow the only way in which Victor could ever be convinced across all timelines is if Jayce blasts Victor first and then convinces him later, I simply don't believe you. There is no way that rather than taking the simple act of talking to Victor, you have to try to murder him a second time, and then have someone else try to murder him, only then to talk to him. Either old Victor did not try as many timelines as he said he did, or something is funky here. And you know, there is one final thing that I want to look at before we top things off. Something that I've been saving for the very end, because I really feel like it encompasses so much of what I am trying to say. When fighting with Victor, Jayce says this.
Had you given me the chance, I would have shown you the merits of my work. Our work.
No. This is your obsession. Everything you've done to these people, you did alone.
Your obsession. In Jayce's mind, Hextech was Victor's obsession. His obsession alone. This line summarizes Jayce's character perfectly. A stump of wood so devoid of self-awareness that he believes himself to be a tree. Arcane sees Jayce as a hero. He has his dark moments, but in the end he will return to do the right thing, and he will be on the right side. In actuality, Jayce can be anything. He can be a hero, a villain, a politician, a reckless fool, a friend, an enemy. He can be selfless or selfish. Jayce is so much at once that he becomes nothing at all. A blank slate that can become whatever the writers need him to be. All the while, Jayce can't reflect on any of it, because a character can only be as self-aware as the story that it's in. That is the problem with Jayce. Wow. Thank goodness I don't have to talk about that guy anymore, huh? Is what I would say, but we need to transition into our next character, Caitlyn. And in order to do that, we have to talk about the relationship between Jayce and Caitlyn first. At the beginning of Arcane, Jayce and Caitlyn are shown to be friends. I'm not really sure why, but at some point this just isn't true anymore. And I don't mean they have a fight or they discuss it and decide not to be friends. I mean that at some point they just stop speaking to each other. Over the course of the first season, Jayce and Caitlyn have several scenes together. They start out as childhood friends and then continue to rely on each other into adulthood. During the early parts of the show, Jayce and Caitlyn's friendship seems to be an important plot point. After Caitlyn leaves to find Silco in episode 5, Jayce obviously can't talk to her, but he does mention in episode 7 that he knows she's missing and is worried about her. Unfortunately, when Caitlyn does return in episode 8, Jayce doesn't react at all. Caitlyn and Vi go in front of the council, and there's no mention of her having been missing. They don't have a reunion conversation or really acknowledge each other in any meaningful way. This also just so happens to be the last time that they speak for the rest of the season.
One man leads these efforts. Silco.
What does the Silco even want from us? We have Hextech.
What happened to you?
After Caitlyn's mom dies in episode 1 of season 2, Mel is nice enough to remind Jayce that Caitlyn exists.
Caitlyn was there. He might pay her a visit.
So he goes down to speak with her. Jayce apologizes for not being around much, and they have a conversation as friends. This is the last time that they acknowledge each other for the rest of the show, and I'm not kidding. After Season 2, Episode 1, the show just forgets that they were friends. Caitlyn doesn't talk about Jayce's disappearance, Jayce doesn't talk to Caitlyn after his return, and they have no conclusion to their relationship whatsoever. There is one council scene where they talk in each other's general direction at the very end of the show, but that's just to discuss the war plan. As far as Arcane is concerned, their relationship ends out of nowhere.
If he reaches the Hex Gates,
Then we'd best stop him.
This one was more weird than anything. It doesn't really have any huge impact on the plot, so I didn't feel the need to discuss it beyond pointing it out. It's just weird that the writers made it seem like their relationship was important and then just kind of forgot about it partway through. Regardless, I think it's time we stop talking about Jayce and take a closer look at our next major character. Surprisingly, Caitlyn remains pretty consistent throughout the first season. Her arc mostly centers around learning about the oppression of Zaun. Her character growth is about coming to terms with this oppression and then trying to take a stand against it. Caitlyn is generally characterized as someone who's caring and often tries to do the right thing. Please remember this for later. There is, however, one major area of inconsistency in Season 1. Besides her magically disappearing relationship with Jayce, of course. Funnily enough, the only other thing that stood out to me was her relationship with Vi. And no, obviously I don't mean that I have a problem with Caitlyn and Vi having a relationship. I'm more of talking about how fast it happens. For whatever reason, Vi and Caitlyn's relationship starting with episode 7 seems to develop at like Mach 10 speed. Before episode 7, their relationship is filled with a lot of conflict. There are scenes where they seem to care, like when Caitlyn saves Vi's life, but there's far more argument than there is friendship. In episode 7, they literally talk about how they can't trust each other.
I knew it was a mistake trusting you.
You've been a real picnic yourself.
Later that same episode, they're just friends. They even share a hug. It's implied that this is because Caitlyn tried to fight for Vi's release, but it's never explained why Caitlyn just stops being angry at Vi. In the very next episode, Vi opens up to Caitlyn like they're close friends. This is a pretty big jump to make in a single day. From not trusting each other, to being friends and hugging, to opening up about their deepest secrets. And this jet-propelled relationship just keeps going. After the weird council scene where Caitlyn and Vi are trying to accomplish different things despite planning to talk to the council together, more on that later, this happens.
Top side and bottom, oil and water, that's all there is.
What about us?
What? What about it? When did us happen? Did I miss an episode? Because it feels like Vi and Caitlyn made out in a back room somewhere, and I didn't get to see it. I feel kinda bad for Caitlyn here. She got rejected before she could even be in a relationship. But you know what? I will say this. In the grand scheme of things, this isn't that big of a deal. The relationship does happen way too quickly, but you generally get the idea that that's where the relationship is heading fairly early on in the story. Narratively, it does make sense for them to start as enemies and end as comrades, or even something more. They just forgot to add all the stuff that goes in between.
I'm charmed, baby, and I know you must be too.
Call me Candy.
Overall, not that bad. Caitlyn cares about injustice and fights for what's right. That remains consistent throughout the entire season. So, you may be asking, what's the problem? Well, let's talk about Season 2, shall we? In episode 1 of Season 2, we're shown that Caitlyn's mom died from the rocket that Jinx shot at the council room. This obviously impacts her very heavily, but it's made clear that she does not outright hate Zaun. She makes two comments in particular. One about not wanting the innocents of Zaun to be killed.
We flood the Undercity with enforcers, armed with hex tech.
Innocents will be caught in the crossfire.
And the other about Vi showing that not all people in Zaun are bad.
People are calling for blood. The council won't stop them. You can show that not all of Zaun supports Jinx.
I will later prove why Vi doesn't fit that description, but for now all that matters is what Caitlyn thinks. Later on, when she speaks with Jayce, she talks about how easy it would be to hate all of Zaun, but that she doesn't want to feel that way because of the actions of one individual.
Then there's Jinx. I want to tear that laugh from her throat forever.
Kate.
I know. I just understand now how easy it is to hate them. One vicious act.
She also claims that although Hextech might keep them alive, it's not the answer to their problems.
Hextech may keep us alive, Jayce, but it's not what will save us.
This, impressively, lines up very well with her character. Struggling with her opinion of Zaun makes perfect sense. She lost her mom, which is a hugely traumatic experience. But since her characterization up until this point has shown how much she values innocent people's lives, it also makes sense for her to hate Jinx and Silco's organization rather than the whole of Zaun. Sadly, this impressive show of character consistency doesn't even last one whole episode. Piltover holds a memorial for those who fell in the attack, including Caitlyn's mom. This is where one of the Chem Barons that worked for Silco stages an attack on the memorial. She does this out of retaliation for Jayce having nuked her son. Eventually, the attack is repelled with the combined forces of Noxus and Piltover. This is also the scene in which the Zero Development and Screen Time Avengers assemble as a commercial for TFT. The memorial being destroyed causes Caitlyn to completely backtrack on everything she said before. She even refers to the people of Zaun as animals.
A memorial? What kind of animals?
She also immediately tasks Jayce with creating Hextech weapons, despite what she said earlier, so that she can send a strike force into Zaun.
Hextech may keep us alive, Jayce, but it's not what will save us. We've got a few surprises of our own.
So, let's look at what happened here. When I first watched this scene, I felt very confused by something. Why did they make it so that Caitlyn had a stronger reaction to her mother's memorial being attacked rather than her mother actually dying? I respected their choice to not have Caitlyn immediately start hating Zaun after her mother's death, but if given enough time and effort, it wouldn't be impossible to develop such a significant change, especially after a traumatic experience. So if the writers were planning to have her change her mind about everything later that very same episode, then why not have her begin her transformation after her mom dies? Why have her remain steadfast on her principles in the face of her mother's death, only to immediately falter after her memorial is attacked? I guess you could argue that Jinx wasn't the only one for her to blame this time, but why would that matter? These are the gangs that rule over Zaun, the gangs that worked alongside Jinx. Even if Jinx isn't leading the charge, this is the same enemy that Caitlyn already hated. Caitlyn has talked several times about how she doesn't want to blame all of Zaun for the actions of a few individuals.
It's a misunderstanding. They think you work for Silco. It's citizens living on the streets, being poisoned, having to choose between a kingpin who wants to exploit them.
Then we have to go in by force.
That could trigger war.
There are good people down there.
She reinforces it in this very episode. And I also don't buy the argument that this was the straw that broke the camel's back. If Jinx killing Caitlyn's mom wasn't enough, then goons attacking the memorial shouldn't be either. Unless I guess Caitlyn just liked statue mom more than her real mom.
You can show that not all of Zaun supports Jinx. What kind of animals?
So why did the writers portray Caitlyn in this way? I really couldn't figure that out on first viewing. That is, until episode 3, of course. In episode 3, at Mbessa's prompting, Caitlyn decides to go full dictator mode. Her left hand even becomes Noxian for a brief moment. It is then revealed that Mbessa had helped facilitate the attack on the memorial in secret. This was in order to help spur Caitlyn into hating Zaun. That way, Caitlyn could be brought to power with Mbessa as her aide. This is where it all started to make sense for me. The writers couldn't have Caitlyn react strongly to her mother's death because her mother was killed by Jinx. They can't have that be Mbessa's plot because Jinx and Mbessa have never met before. So they need to delay Caitlyn's breakdown long enough to where it can happen during an event that Mbessa planned. Basically, if Caitlyn hated Zaun because her mother died, then they don't get to have their cool "I planned it the whole time" climax for episode 3. I mean, just zoom out for a moment. They had Caitlyn be more impacted by her mother's memorial than her mother actually dying. And they only did that so that they could have a Noxian fist bump party to end out episode 3. I honestly feel like a lot of the writing flaws that happen in Arcane could be avoided if they just didn't need to have a climax every 3 episodes. Thanks a lot, Netflix. But let's back up for a second and analyze Caitlyn's transformation into a dictator. Caitlyn's invasion of Zaun is actually played out in AMV montage form. I would assume that they do this to lessen the impact of how morally reprehensible her actions are, but I'm not really sure.
The innocent Manders trod and bled and gassed and starved and beaten and murdered and enslaved.
It's not made very clear how many innocent people are sucked up into the hunt, but one thing is made very clear. Caitlyn's primary means of combating Silco's gang members is through the use of chemical warfare. Caitlyn reverses the ventilation systems that have been keeping toxic gas at bay within Zaun. She essentially pumps mustard gas into Zaun's air supply. Now, although the gas has been shown to not be deadly in small doses, we've seen what toxic air does to people. Now imagine the frail civilians of Zaun having nothing but this to breathe for who knows how long. And before you try to argue that they only used it on Silco's gang, during an argument between Vi and Jinx, this happens.
Wild, the kind of crap people get up to when you choke them out.
We use the Grey to clear the streets, to keep people safe.
To keep people safe.
I implore you to reconsider.
This might actually be the stupidest line in the entire show. This is worse than Jinx's followers being called Jinxers. Vi just admitted to her and Caitlyn dropping toxic chemicals on a civilian population, and her reasoning is that it was to keep them safe. Imagine if a country in real life dropped bombs and then said that they were only trying to keep everyone safe by encouraging them to stay in their shelters. No one would ever buy this excuse.
I'm not violent at all. Look!
But you killed those people!
Did I? What he doesn't know is that I'm using reverse psychology.
And I'm sure the people of Zon staying indoors will really help against the toxic gas replacing their entire air supply. I mean, this is morality 101. Don't use chemicals on innocent civilians. There's a reason that chemical warfare is banned in real life. And I know that the Geneva Convention doesn't exist in this world, but come on, dude. If the law is the only thing keeping you from gassing civilians, then something is wrong. And you could have at least given a remotely believable reason. Toddlers could have come up with a better excuse than this. At least when a toddler steals from the cookie jar, they pretend like they don't know where the cookies possibly could have come from. Vi is just admitting that she is aware of how horrible their actions are, but has no concept of it being wrong. The show never calls her out on this, by the way, so I guess her logic is sound by Arcane standards. And excuses aside, we haven't even talked about what this means for Caitlyn's character. The same Caitlyn that all throughout Season 1 was shown to value the life and prosperity of innocent people above all else is now spraying men, women, and children with the world's largest can of Raid.
This city needs healing, more than I ever realized. Please, let me help you.
Yes, her mother died, which would severely impact anybody, but it was literally her mother who designed this ventilation system in the first place.
I've instructed our architects to devise a ventilation system. The people of the underground deserve to breathe.
She's spitting on her mother's name by doing this. And of course, we haven't even talked about the scene that tops it all off. Just to show that there really is nothing left of her character, Caitlyn tries to shoot Jinx even though a child is standing in the way. Now, would it be possible for Vi and Caitlyn to simply move the child? Of course it would be. Vi is literally standing right next to the child. Or Caitlyn could just walk up and shoot Jinx at point blank range. In fact, a number of things could happen here. But then, of course, Jinx would be dead and the story would be over, so that can't happen. Instead, Jinx gets away and Vi confronts Caitlyn. We will talk about why Vi confronting Caitlyn doesn't make sense here at a later time, but for now, that's what happens. Caitlyn doesn't have any remorse and knocks Vi to the ground. This signals her full transformation into an uncaring individual, capable of doing anything for the sake of her goal.
I had the shot. That was a kid. What if you missed? I wasn't going to miss.
And look, if you really want to argue that Caitlyn's transformation makes perfect sense, then that's fine. I don't buy the idea that her mom dying led to her instantly doing a 180 on everything she believed in prior, but a good guy turning into a bad guy is a common narrative. The problem is, even if you believe that everything up until this point makes sense, her next character development, in my opinion, is completely undefendable. So let's keep going. After Caitlyn's rise to power, we get the ultimate trump card for writers that don't know what to do: a time skip. Now, a time skip does not have to be lazy, they can be done well and support the story. There's actually an example of a good time skip in Season 1. It makes sense that after we see Vi and Jinx as kids, that we get a time skip to show when they're adults. This is because the characters are very similar to where we left them, and the changes that do occur get explained or given context over time. That's the main thing. Any changes that take place during a time skip need to be explained at some point, even if it's not right away. If the writers just use a time skip as a get-out-of-jail-free card to change their characters without showing how, then you are basically just using the writing equivalent of the Konami code. And let me tell you, the writers definitely used a lot of Konami code here. After the time skip, Caitlyn is immediately her old character from Season 1 again. Dictator Caitlyn didn't doesn't even last 3 full episodes. We are also never shown even remotely why this change occurs. We get some scenes of Caitlyn being regretful over her actions, but we're never told what led her to become regretful in the first place.
What greater cause is there than returning peace to this city?
Why is peace always the justification for violence?
So, just to be clear, Caitlyn is characterized as a person that heavily values innocent life and hates injustice for all of Season 1. Her mom dies, and then suddenly she becomes so evil that she's willing to gas civilian populations, kill children, and fully put Zahn under Piltover's oppression. But then a time skip happens, and she's nice again, for no discernible reason other than that she feels bad.
But Eloise is ill. They must have some money. Please let him win speed. Speed! Speed! Speed!
This is not a story arc. It's a story circus. The amazing disappearing and reappearing Caitlyn. Sometimes our character is there and sometimes it's not. What a magic trick. They just want us to believe that she had tons of development off screen. There should not be a moment in a story where I feel like the writers are saying, just trust me, bro. Why did they even do this? Why did they destroy Caitlyn's character if they were just going to reset it a couple episodes later? I can tell you why. It's because the plot needed her to be reset. You see, they need a reason for Caitlyn to suddenly switch sides as soon as she meets back up with Vi later in the show. In my opinion, this doesn't make sense in any context, but it would make even less sense if Caitlyn was full dictator and then did a 180 as soon as she met Vi. So instead, we continue to have dictator Caitlyn, who overlooks the oppression of Zahn, but she feels kind of bad about it.
I don't know what I thought. It wasn't this.
You could call it off. All you have to do is give the order.
Not without Jinx.
Don't worry, Caitlyn. There's just an entire city full of people being treated like cattle while you mull over your feelings. I'm sure they can wait for you to meet up with Vi and turn good again. Maybe Caitlyn is a sleeper agent and Cupcake is her trigger word.
Don't sugarcoat it, Cupcake.
And you know what the best part is? To top everything off, when Caitlyn finally finds Jinx again, she doesn't even kill her. Then why did you become a dictator, Caitlyn? Huh? Why? All of those civilians that got gassed and oppressed by your nonsense are crying right now because you did all of that for nothing.
Not without Jinx.
It don't matter. None of this matters.
Caitlyn can't even stay in character long enough to follow through with the core motivation she had for doing all of those horrible things. I guess Jinx hugging a furry was enough to convince her. All of this comes to a head at our final plot point for Caitlyn, which is the war with Noxus. Now, I know that the war with Noxus is not solely related to Caitlyn, but I feel like this is the best time to talk about it. Caitlyn's arc is pretty heavily tied to the war, and this kind of represents the end of her story. I really only have one major question for you, though. Why does Zahn join Piltover? When I first watched Arcane, I watched it together with my friends. During the scene where Savika comes and rescues Piltover, one of my friends, who likes Arcane by the way, shouted out loud, "What is happening?" There is, quite literally, zero reason given as to why Zahn suddenly stops hating Piltover. Zahn are slaves to Piltover on a societal level, even ignoring the years of Piltover keeping Zahn poverty-stricken and looking at them as lower-class citizens. When Caitlyn rises to power, they practically treat Zahn like prisoners. There's a reason why I have been referring to Caitlyn as a dictator. They should hate Piltover more than anything, and for 99% of the show, they do. I mean, just look at this. This is literally a scene out of Half-Life. This guy gets arrested because his hair is blue. They hate Jinx so much that they made the color blue illegal. I feel like I shouldn't even really have to explain this. Zahn struggling with the oppression of Piltover is one of the core themes of the show. Arcane consistently reinforces the idea that there is good and bad on both sides, but the inherent classism of their society is a huge point of conflict. So you would expect that the show is heading towards some kind of conclusion that will bring home the insights or morals that they're trying to portray. And yet when I scoured Season 2 for even a single scene of Piltover making things things right with Zahn. I found nothing. The last time before the war where Zahn is even shown in relation to Piltover or Noxus is when they hold a meeting in episode 4. During this meeting, Savika talks about how they need to rise up and unite against Piltover. Then Mini Jinx shows up and everyone cheers because her hair is blue. This happens just in time for Noxus to arrive and arrest everyone. Just to be clear again, this is the last thing that happens before Jayce goes to them and asks them to join the war. And Jayce's appeal to the people of Zahn basically boils down into him saying, "Hey guys, listen. I know that we kind of oppressed you for generations on end, but the world is in danger and we could really use your help. This is kind of more important than how much you hate us, so let's come together and give it the old college try."
This isn't a fight for ideals or territory. It's a fight for humanity itself. Now, this isn't a fair request, but it is our only hope. The forces against us are too great, but I'm choosing to fight, and I pray that you will join me.
Would you ever, in a million years, believe your oppressors if they said this? Going back to the Half-Life analogy, this would be like if the alien overlords asked the humans to join their cause because some other aliens were threatening Earth. And then the civilians and rebels just took their word at face value and dropped everything to help them. Mr. Freeman would be seething. They also don't really go into Zahn's motivation for joining Piltover at all. For the first batch of Zahn that join, the only motivation we're shown is an enforcer helping this old lady. If that's all it took, then how have you not seen an old lady being helped by this point? Hire this enforcer as an ambassador because she did more work in this one scene than generations of diplomacy in Piltover. Oh, and this lady dies one episode later, by the way, so this was literally a life or death decision for her. And if you want to argue that the people of Zahn are just fighting for those that would be left behind, there are none. It's clearly shown that anyone can leave if they want to. I could maybe understand if they 100% knew that the world would just straight up end if they don't do anything. But this basically boils down into them putting their faith into one guy from Piltover who looks like he just finished starring in an episode of Survivor. Not only that, but considering the payoff that Arcane goes for at the end of the show, this is clearly meant to be a setting aside our differences moment. But what did Piltover do to earn that from Zahn? It would make more sense if Savika showed up and started helping Noxus. It still wouldn't make sense, but it would make more sense than this. At least Noxus has only been oppressing them for a couple of years. It's not like two opposing sides coming to understand each other and joining forces is even that uncommon of a theme in media. In fact, it's probably one of the most common themes out there. And for good reason, it can be very inspiring. But you have to actually add in the parts where they come to appreciate each other. Arcane forgot to have any of the things that would allow for this payoff to happen, and then just made it happen anyway. This actually undermines the message that I thought they were trying to portray. If a core theme of Arcane is how people can be impacted in various ways by the oppression within society, then this ending basically sends the message that we should all just forgive and forget. Now, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's not how oppression works. That's more like the moral you would have at the end of a story where your little brother stole your favorite toy. But that doesn't really work as a moral in a story where the little brother committed generational class-based exploitation. And don't even get me started on the way that the war ends. I mean, what is this? Why is there a Noxian conga line duel on my screen right now? Why is Mbessa 2v1ing for the fate of the entire war? Why is she being ganked by the enemy jungler while an army of bot laners just sits there and does nothing? Mbessa is supposed to be a ruthless strategist, not a bumbling moron. The only reason Mbessa does this is because they want to have a cool comeback moment when Jinx shows up. But Mbessa has basically already won the war. There's practically no way for them to win unless Mbessa throws away her win for no reason. So, that's exactly what happens. This is the last thing that Caitlyn does as a character, by the way. Her final impact on the story is getting trounced by Noxus and then watching a wandering wizard cast Deus Ex Machina. What a fitting end to her arc. I've often heard the defense that Arcane's biggest problem is its pacing, and that things would have been fine if it was given more time. But you have to remember, Arcane doesn't have to have these story beats. The final episode is just a symptom of a problem that persists throughout the entire show. Arcane could have picked any time to change the direction of Caitlyn's character or the conflict between Piltover and Noxus if they knew they weren't going to have the time to make it work. But instead, we get this. An inflexible narrative backed by nonsensical reasoning.
My name is Dib Membrane. I'm 12 years old.
I think that's everything I wanted to say about Caitlyn and the war. Now it's time to get down to real business. Because at its heart, Arcane is a story about two sisters. Let's talk about Jinx and Vi. And to finish things out, I'll talk about the scene in episode 3 that was my primary reason for making this video in the first place. But before that, we start with Vi. I've been waiting for this.
How long were you sidled up with that shifty, self-serving war pig? She oinked poison in your ear and you just ate it.
When I first watched Arcane, Jayce was by far my least favorite character. And he still is. I mean, just look at the guy. But after really deep diving into the show, I came to realize how few redeeming qualities Vi actually has. Don't get me wrong, she does start with plenty of redeeming qualities, but they slowly get chipped away one by one until she has nothing left. At the start of the show, Vi has two core values. One, she loves her sister and wants to keep her safe by any means necessary. And two, she hates Piltover and the Enforcers for how they treated her family and the people of Zaun. For the first 7 episodes of Arcane, Vi's priorities center almost entirely around Jinx. Even after learning that Jinx works for Silco and has killed many innocent people, Vi remains dedicated to her sister. Vi has several scenes where she ensures that she will not leave her sister behind a second time, no matter who Jinx has become as a person. In episode 7, Vi has to pick between going with Echo and Caitlyn or going back into Zaun to find her sister. During this scene, Vi says this.
I can't leave her again.
You can't change her.
I have to try.
So, much to my surprise, when not even a few minutes later, Vi does exactly that.
I can't leave her again.
Nothing even happens in between these two scenes, the only exception being Jinx using explosives on Caitlyn and Echo, which actually miraculously gets them out of their life or death situation. Quick editor's note, I didn't realize this before, but there is actually a scene of Jinx shooting at Vi and Caitlyn's feet to break them apart. This doesn't change anything for me because no one got hurt, and Jinx has pointed a gun at them before, but I still felt like it was important context for me to include. Okay. End of note. And Vi, you already knew that Jinx kills innocent people. Did you forget the wall? What about when you said this?
Powder's gone, Vi. All that's left is Jinx, and she belongs to
You're
Silco.
wrong. She's still in there. I can reach her.
Why is Vi leaving this fight to Echo when she was ready to give up everything for Jinx just moments ago? I mean, I'm still trying to figure out what I'm even supposed to assume happened here. There's no explanation, no dialogue, no insights into how the characters changed. It's just one moment Vi loves Jinx more than anything, and then the next she doesn't care anymore. And sure, it's possible for characters to subtly change without dialogue. But this change is about as subtle as bashing tambourines in my face. There's no subtext to be had here. We can't be expected to read between the lines if the lines don't even exist to begin with. Also, this is just a little detail, but I love how Vi runs to save Caitlyn when Echo has literally been shot. Like, Echo got lucky and is fine, but Vi doesn't know that. I mean, poor Echo, just look at this. After this, Vi goes to find that Silco has gotten a hold of Jinx. Now, I will give the show some credit here. I don't exactly see her going in and taking care of all these goons, even though she did do that as a child. But I do want to point out that she doesn't even go to check if Echo is still alive. But you want to know what the best part is? This is the last time that Vi and Echo interact. Ever. and I mean across both seasons. After Vi presumably believes Echo to be dead from this explosion, she never speaks of or thinks of him again. There's no dialogue, no reflection, not even an offhand comment to acknowledge his existence. The only other time they are on screen together is in the final episode of season 2. She rides on his skateboard for like a second and they don't even speak to each other. Why is Vi, who practically raised Echo as a little brother, taking the out-of-sight, out-of-mind approach to him exploding? It's kind of absurd to me that this is the last episode they're in together. Do you want to see the last thing that they say to each other?
Go!
What a thrilling conclusion to their relationship.
I missed you, little man.
But let's move on to the next bit of development for Vi. During the dreaded council scene, Vi begins to argue that Piltover needs to invade Zaun to deal with Silco. It's important to note that this scene has the first instance of Vi using the name Jinx instead of Powder. Up until this point, Vi has always been insistent on using the name Powder instead of Jinx, so her going back on that implies that Vi now thinks the sister she knew is gone. Also, dealing with Silco to Piltover means dealing with Jinx, so this is essentially Vi supporting either the death or arrest of her sister. I'm not sure why what happened on the bridge is what led her to this conclusion, but to be fair, I don't think the show is either. And there's actually another problem with this scene. Why is Vi trying to convince Piltover to go to war with Zaun? She even gets angry, saying that Piltover never changes. Vi is acting like the council is refusing to deal with Silco because they simply don't care about Zaun. But the show makes it very clear that dealing with Silco means war with Zaun, during which many innocent people will die. Jayce talks about it in his negotiations with Silco later on.
Today I got a glimpse of what war between us might look like. Your people wouldn't stand a chance. I'm trying to save you from annihilation.
And we see the aftermath of dealing with Silco firsthand in Season 2. Caitlyn, in this very council scene, argues against the idea of war by saying that there are good people in Zaun who could get hurt. I understand that Vi would be mad about Silco not being dealt with, but why would that automatically mean that she wants Piltover, the people that she hates, to wipe out innocent people in Zaun? I mean, just stepping back for a second, is it not strange that Vi is arguing Piltover never changes because they don't want to go to war with Zaun?
Jayce, you don't know war. It must be our last resort. There may be a diplomatic solution.
You want to negotiate with him?
It may be the only way to avoid further bloodshed.
This is insane. Did you learn nothing? This is how things are, how they've always been. I was so stupid to think it could change.
It would make way more sense if Vi just chose to ignore Piltover entirely and go to deal with Silco on her own, which she actually does right after. And how are Caitlyn and Vi not on the same page here anyway? They came in together. Did you not discuss what you were going to talk about ahead of time?
Then we have to go in by force.
That could trigger war.
There are good people down there.
What? You want to negotiate with him?
Why is Caitlyn the one arguing for the innocent lives of Zaun and not Vi? I thought that Vi cared about the people of Zaun being oppressed. It's like Vi is arguing against the corruption in Piltover while everyone else is having a completely different conversation.
You can't talk to him.
You want peace. This is the price.
Maybe they originally had 2 scripts, but performed a Dragon Ball fusion dance to combine them. Only that makes it feel like our characters are having conversations in different timelines while standing in the same room. And you know what? I actually have a theory as to why this scene feels so disjointed. With the way that Vi, Caitlyn, and Jayce have been characterized up until this point, this scene cannot exist. At least it can't exist if Jayce and Vi are supposed to team up, which is their next big plot development. During this scene, Arcane needs Caitlyn to stick up for Zaun and be against Jayce. Jayce needs to be in favor of war against Zaun, and Vi needs to both agree with Jayce and care about Zaun. Those things can't happen all at once. If they wanted their next cool scene, they had to assassinate one of the characters, and Vi drew the short stick. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, what if they just changed the team up? Or what if they took their time to develop things in a way that makes sense? And I agree with you. That would be good writing. As this scene continues, Vi and Caitlyn argue in the rain. Vi, disgusted by the fact that Piltover won't go to war with Zaun and Silco, breaks up with Caitlyn even though they weren't dating. We then get the scene where Jayce collaterals that kid that we are all now familiar with. This is where Jayce says that he can't continue fighting out of guilt. And Vi says this.
You've always been a part of this. You just never had to look it in the eye. One dead kid? There's hundreds more where he came from, thanks to Silco and thanks to people like you who stuck their heads in the dirt.
I'm sorry, can we get that one more time? How did it come to this? So Vi's newest character trait is that she hates children. And yes, I know that her argument is about the greater good and that kids die all the time in Zaun, etc., etc. But that doesn't mean that you have to kill the rest of them. And just listen to this little gem of a line.
You didn't have a choice. He knew what he was signing up for.
Oh yeah? Did he, Vi? The literal 12-year-old knew what he was signing up for when you obliterated him. The 12-year-old whose mother is a mafia boss knew what he was signing up for. Thank you, Vi, for your words of wisdom.
What's up, Doc? Jumping without a parachute? Kinda dangerous, ain't it?
Yeah, you could get killed, huh?
Where is the empathy? Even the warmonger Jayce is grieving, and yet Vi, the one who supposedly cares about Zaun, doesn't even bat an eye. When I first watched this, I thought that someone used an Uno reverse card on me because it felt like they should be switched. I mean, what even is Vi's character at this point? What does she value? She doesn't care about Jinx. She doesn't care about Zaun. She broke up with Caitlyn. The only thing Vi cares about is killing Silco, and she will murder as many innocent children as it takes to get there. And yes, characters can change. Characters can turn evil. Characters can even hate children. But from the way the series progresses, we know that Vi is not meant to be that type of character. Vi had empathy and will have empathy again. But just like Caitlyn, her character is on hold so that we can create unnecessary conflict. In fact, if you don't agree with my arguments yet, just wait. We will return to this later. You have not seen the last of Vi, the hater of children.
I know you hurt innocent people! No one is innocent!
The only other important scene in Season 1 is where Vi and Jinx talk in the final episode. Here, Vi acts like she cares about Jinx again, calling her Powder. Now, it is implied that this was said more out of duress, so I don't think that it's meant to mean that she just suddenly started caring about Jinx again out of nowhere. This is kind of confirmed by her actions at the start of Season 2. So, that ends Vi's characterization in Season 1. She started as a character that only cared about Jinx and Zaun, and now she cares about neither.
Don't you know I'm dead inside?
We pick up in Season 2 where Vi says to Caitlyn that Powder is dead. There is only Jinx now. Caitlyn offers Vi a position as an enforcer, but Vi turns it down. Vi argues that she lost her parents to enforcers, and that Caitlyn doesn't understand what it's like to lose a parent. Caitlyn obviously calls her out on this because she just lost her mom yesterday. Vi then storms off saying that Caitlyn just wasn't thinking. Just to be clear, Vi is saying that her parent dying, which happened years ago, is more traumatic than Caitlyn's parent dying within the last 24 hours.
I watched them kill my parents. Do you have any idea how that feels?
Yes, I do. I thought you were on our side.
You didn't think at all.
I got it draining 3 times a day, so my brain can think good. We're hoping that's temporary.
To be fair, though, considering how things have gone up until this point, trauma comparing with someone that just lost their mom might be the most in-character thing she could have done here. Thank goodness Caitlyn wasn't sad over a child dying, or Vi might have really let her have it. Of course, later that same episode, they managed to make up. Vi then becomes Caitlyn's #1 fan. She goes with Caitlyn and helps her invade Zaun, while also trying to be there for her emotionally. As shown earlier, Vi also defends Caitlyn for gassing the innocent civilians. During one of the scenes, Vi says this.
Everyone in my life has changed. Promise me you won't change.
This is very funny coming from Vi. I'm sure that if episode 4 Vi saw the current version, old Vi would punch herself in the face. Eventually, Vi and Caitlyn catch up to Jinx and confront her. During this scene, Vi says this.
Never thought my sister would turn bluebelly.
Never thought mine would orphan kids.
I'm not even going to try and explain this, just watch these 2 clips together.
Never thought mine would orphan kids.
Vi corners Jinx and gets ready to punch her with her big hand. Before she can do so, Mini Jinx gets in the way. This causes Vi to back off and block Caitlyn from shooting. Jinx ends up escaping, which leads to an argument between our two Jinx haters.
You stopped me.
I shouldn't have had to.
I had the shot. That was a kid. What have you missed?
Roll clip.
That was a kid.
One dead kid?
If there is a realm that goes beyond the hypocritical, then Vi just gave it a new dimension. If I played those clips for you without context, you would think that I got the seasons reversed. But no. I think the writers just forgot to rewatch Season 1 before making 2. Either that, or they just needed an excuse to create drama between Caitlyn and Vi. It's probably the latter, but I like to believe the former. So, Caitlyn breaks up with Vi, and we get a time skip. When we see her next, Vi is now in her emo phase. This is honestly just sad to me. Vi's character has been reduced to the girl who likes Caitlyn. Now, I'm not saying that her relationship with Caitlyn can't be an important part of her story, but it can't be her whole story. Now that Caitlyn is gone, Vi both literally and narratively has nothing left. Her character is just an empty void. And if you want to argue that that's the point, her character is always trying to fill the void created by her guilt over her sister, and now her self-destructive tendencies have left her with nothing. That would be very poetic, but it's not accurate.
And then there is a cat, Garfield. This is the nature of the world here.
Vi was stripped of her hatred for the oppression that Piltover carries out on Zaun, which was meant to be a reflection of Vander's values. We are never shown why. She was stripped of her love for her sister, which was her entire purpose in life after her actions as a child. We are never shown why. Vi's entire character becomes about dealing with Jinx and Silco, but it's never explained why killing them is now her purpose in life. And after Silco dies, Vi doesn't even seem to care. So then her new purpose becomes Caitlyn, and Vi pushes Caitlyn away with her very own hands, despite the fact that Vi suddenly caring about children again is so out of left field that it basically came from right field. So now that Caitlyn is gone, what is Vi's character exactly? How would you define Vi in this moment? What does she value? Vi had a character. It's not there now, but I swear it was there a second ago. You can have a character with nothing left. It can be very impactful and give important insights. But what insight does this provide? We already knew that she liked Caitlyn, so what does this show us? That Vi is sad? Vi doesn't have a character, so there's nothing to be learned from her breakdown. She's nothing now. She's just the emo lady who used to date Caitlyn.
Looks like you're a born loser!
At least it'll make for a good skin, though. And if you still don't believe me, then just look at how Arcane resolves this very problem. Vi doesn't have any values left, but the show isn't done with her. They need to give her something to work with fast, or there won't be any reason for her to be in the show. So, what do? They just bring Jinx back into the picture. When Jinx and Vi reunite, they remain hostile towards each other for about half an episode. The moment Vi sees that Jinx is friends with a child, she just completely goes back on everything that was developed prior. She no longer thinks that Powder is dead, and she no longer wants to kill Jinx. When Furry Vander shows up, she even does a group hug like they're one big family again. That's how things get resolved. They didn't know what to do with Vi, so they just gave her one of her old character traits back without explaining anything. It took one day to reverse all of her desire to kill Jinx, just like it took one day for her to suddenly stop caring back in Season 1. If Arcane was trying to give some insight or provide some moral, then this would have been the moment to do so. But no. They just had no idea what to do because they painted Vi into a corner. So they just used some paint remover to craft a way out. And again, my frustration isn't at anyone who likes Vi as a character. Because that's the thing. I wouldn't be angry if there was nothing to like. Losing everything and then finding some form of redemption can be very inspiring. But it's hard for me to relate to Vi when all of her emotional beats feel like they aren't coming from her. They're coming from the drama beam that gets shot into her brain all the time. But that's just me. I don't think there's anything wrong with liking any of Arcane's characters, except maybe Jayce. But if there is one thing that I think we all can agree on, it's that Vi needs to make up her mind when it comes to children.
That was a kid.
Moving on from the start of Season 2, Vi's characterization honestly takes a back seat for a while. She mostly just reconnects with Jinx and Furry Vander, and we've already talked about how weird it is that her relationship with Caitlyn gets repaired instantly, so I won't go over that again. We don't get anything substantial to work with until episode 8. In this episode, Vi and Caitlyn fight because Caitlyn allowed Jinx to be arrested. Vi argues that Jinx has changed and that she's a different person now. She also says this.
You didn't let me in on that part of your plan.
Clearly the right call, since you still can't trust her enough not to shove her in a box.
Vi, you moronic brick. What blunt force trauma did you fall victim to warrant such an inhumane level of buffoonery? Jinx killed Caitlyn's mom. What do you mean she still doesn't trust her? When I first watched this, I literally could not believe that this line went through a writer's room, was edited, and then made it to the final cut. And Caitlyn doesn't even say anything to defend herself, by the way. This is literally a conversation between two clowns as they honk their dialogue noses. I just think that Vi might be the cause of every problem in Arcane at this point. And I don't even have to think it because it's canonical. In the timeline where Vi dies, literally everyone is alive and happy. It's like a paradise. Silco even makes up with Vander in this timeline. It is canonical to the show that Vi is the source of all suffering. Even the writers themselves are aware of this fact. Honestly, if the whole of Arcane is just some big brain play by the writers and they were just trying to show us that we should have hated Vi all along, then consider me owned. Also, this doesn't matter at all, but what is this dialogue?
Didn't you try to kill him?
Greatest thing we can do in life is find the power to forgive.
Anyway, I've ranted over this long enough. There's one more thing we need to discuss before we move on to Jinx. And no, I'm not talking about the prison scene. I can't, nor would I want to, systematically deconstruct the narrative relevance of Spicy Time. What we do need to talk about is the conversation between Jinx and Vi that takes place within the prison. Vi goes to break Jinx out of jail when this happens.
You're never gonna give up on me, are you?
Interesting. Vi will never give up on you, huh? Roll clip.
Are you sure you're
My sister is gone. There's only Jinx now.
Kate, if you see an opening, take the shot.
Coincidentally, right after this, Vi gives up on Jinx immediately and becomes intimate with Caitlyn.
You're never gonna give up on me, are you?
I was an idiot to trust her. I went behind your back. I choose wrong every time.
It don't matter. None of this matters.
And you know what? At this point, I honestly do believe that ignoring your sister that went to go Minecraft herself in order to make out in a jail cell is very in line with Vi's character. And if you want one final piece of proof of how little they felt like they could do with Vi at this point, Vi has like 3 lines of dialogue in the entire final episode. And one of them is to tell Caitlyn that she's the dirt under her fingernails. Honestly, it's kind of poetic in a way. I'm so glad that Vi and Caitlyn are the ones who get a happy ending. We'll end up talking more about Vi later, but for now, it's time to move on to her other half. If you don't hate me yet, then wish me luck for this one. So, Jinx. Jinx is probably the hardest character to talk about in all of Arcane. Jinx is chaotic by nature, so it's hard to determine if something is in or out of character for her. Her unpredictability, usually caused by her internal conflicts, makes sense as a trait. Unlike with many other characters, there are a lot of well-explained reasons given for the direction of her development in many parts of the show. Upon rewatch, however, there are 3 big issues that stood out to me. But unlike with the other characters, I won't be doing a scene-by-scene breakdown. Instead, I want to try and look at this from a broader perspective. First off, I feel like there are times in the story where Jinx is not held very accountable for her actions by the show. Jinx is a murderer. That is an undeniable fact. Just to name a few examples, Jinx murders these innocent enforcers. I mean, sure, they're shown to be jerks, but that doesn't mean that they deserve to die. Vi is shown a mural by Echo that mourns the people that Silco and Jinx have killed. It's generally implied that Jinx has killed several people just by supporting Silco. And of course, Jinx launches a rocket into the council room, killing Caitlyn's mom along with several others. Vi makes comment on the fact that Jinx has orphaned kids, even though Vi is no one to be lecturing on that.
Never thought mine would orphan kids.
Ha! Why not? Done it to myself enough.
And finally, Jinx gas bombs the streets of Piltover, including a ton of innocent people. Yes, this was in retaliation, but the civilians did nothing to deserve it. These are just a few examples, but Jinx is clearly shown to have murdered innocent people. The show wants you to understand that. So something that confused me when watching the show was how frequently Jinx is portrayed as a tragic heroine rather than a complicated antagonist. Now, obviously it's good for villains to not be one-dimensional, but there are times where it feels like Jinx is not meant to be seen as a villain at all. Silco and Jinx are treated very differently as characters, despite having very similar crimes. Of course, Jinx will always be more sympathetic than Silco because Silco manipulated her, but being sympathetic does not automatically give you a free pass to kill whoever you want. That's why it was kind of confusing to me when Jinx was portrayed as the hero of Zaun in Season 2. Narratively, it makes sense because she's a sign of rebellion for the people. But tonally, something feels off when Jinx is getting a bunch of shoulder pats like she's the patron saint of explosives.
Wake up, sis. I'm a hero.
Not only that, but Jinx is provided a mini version of herself that loves and respects everything she does. It's hard to connect with Jinx as an older sister type when she does things like this.
Also, I brought this dynamite. Goodbye.
Now, to be completely straight, this argument is very difficult to make. It's based around the writer's intentions, which we can never know for sure. But I do have one other scene that I think illustrates my point rather well. When Jinx is in prison, Caitlyn says this.
I'm giving you this one chance to account for your actions, all the pain you've caused. No amount of good deeds can undo our crimes.
This, on its own, feels like a good payoff. Jinx did some good things, but that doesn't automatically erase her crimes. The problem is that it keeps going. After Jinx escapes prison, she ends up in a very dark place emotionally. That's where Echo intervenes and tries to convince her to live on by saying this.
No matter what happened in the past, it's never too late to build something new. Someone worth building it for.
Now, I want you to do an experiment for me. Take any real-world murderer that you've heard of, dye their hair blue, and put them in this scene in place of Jinx. Does that not hit a bit differently? The only way that this line makes sense narratively is if Jinx is not meant to be seen as a villain, but her actions clearly paint a different picture. Jinx has killed Echo's friends right in front of his face. Look at these two scenes together.
It's never too late to build something new.
The only development that they've had since then is Echo living in a different timeline with a different Jinx. Echo just decides to forgive her for everything because he danced with her doppelganger, just like the show expects us to ignore her previous crimes. Not a tragically misunderstood heroine, because you can't misunderstand murdering innocent people. You can feel bad for Jinx, and her actions can be wrong at the same time. Maybe I'm wrong about the writer's intentions here, and I'm just missing something. But I certainly know that Echo giving corny life advice to the person that murdered his friends is a strange move.
Never give up hope.
Now, I know that a common counter-argument to all of this might be Jinx's mental health, which coincidentally is my next big problem with her character. But in order to talk about why, first we need to talk about Mini Jinx. The reason that I've been referring to Isha as Mini Jinx is because her purpose in the show is so incredibly clear from the very first scene. When Isha was first introduced, I had one immediate thought. That kid is Omega dead. It took 4 episodes. There might not be a single character in the show where Arcane's intentions are so blatant. Let's introduce a child that everyone will like who will solve all of Jinx's problems. That way, everyone will be sad when we kill her. Isha comes out of nowhere, brings Jinx instant happiness via time skip, acts as a form of redemption for her character, and then is killed off immediately. Even her self-sacrifice is contrived. She sees Furry Vander going off, so she just runs in and self-destructs without a second thought. She didn't even try to escape with Jinx first. She was so ready to blow herself up that it's kind of scary. But the biggest giveaway for me comes after this. Did you know that Isha is not mentioned even once for the rest of the show? It's implied that Jinx is depressed because of her death, but she never even mentions Isha one time. No one does. It's like she no longer exists after this scene. Once her purpose is served, and they have their cool YouTube moment of self-sacrifice, the show just pretends like that explosion vaporized her from reality. Isha is only relevant long enough to make you feel sad, and then she's forgotten about entirely. That's why Isha will always be Mini Jinx to me. I mean, it's kind of on the nose when you dye her hair blue. But how does all this relate to Jinx's mental health, you may ask? Well, Jinx's mental health remains pretty consistent for a majority of the show. Jinx struggles with intense feelings of guilt, usually personified by hallucinations. Jinx will often have panic attacks when faced with difficult decisions, so her beliefs can change rather rapidly. This is a great example of giving a reason for why a character is changing, and then developing that reason over time.
Horrible nightmare visions! It's called life, Dib. Sit down.
When Jinx is deciding whether to kill Silco or Vi, you could argue that either decision would make sense. We've seen her mental stability fall only lower after feeling betrayed by both people. Her confusion didn't come out of nowhere, the show built up to that moment over several episodes. The actual problem with Jinx's mental health struggles is how they're resolved. After the time skip in episode 4 of season 2, all of Jinx's mental health struggles just go away. And by that, I mean that she no longer has hallucinations or panic attacks, and is portrayed with a much more logical demeanor. In fact, in many scenes, Jinx is the most reasonable person in the room. Not that that's a very high bar when you mostly hang out with Vi, of course. We get one line of dialogue that aims to explain this transformation.
Ever since you dropped into my life, it's like I put on glasses. Except I can't tell whether everything's blurry or clear.
Mini Jinx. Mini Jinx is the reason. This idea is supported by the fact that the only 2 times Jinx struggles with hallucinations after the time skip is once when Isha is kidnapped and once after she dies. But I have a problem with this. You see, that's just not how mental health works. Making a friend does not cure you of your auditory and visual hallucinations. Having friends can help you, sure, but friendship is not a doctor-recommended alternative to medication.
So never stop wishing, Flapjack, and all your dreams will come true. Even the scary ones?
Yes.
Just as a reminder, when we leave Jinx off before the time skip, she was injected with Shimmer, Silco is dead, and her own sister tried to kill her. Jinx was in her worst state ever the last time that we saw her, but now it's all just magically resolved itself off screen. She's better than she's ever been, and it's all thanks to Mini Jinx. Always remember that the solution to all your problems is just one time skip away. Now, I'm not going to go on some ethical tirade about how undermining the struggles of mental health is an insult to real-life situations. It's just a show. I doubt that they had real-life situations in mind when they altered the fabric of time and space. But I do think that it undermines that aspect of Jinx's character. If her mental health is the core motivation behind her crimes under Silco, then artificially resolving those struggles comes off as being cheap. If Jinx is going to get better, then I'm going to need to see how. But honestly, everything that I've talked about so far pales in comparison to my final problem, and that's the relationship between Vander and Jinx. I want you to think back to the last time that you watched Arcane and try try to remember how Jinx feels about Vander. Is he Jinx's father figure? Does Jinx not care about him because of Silco? What does their relationship look like? The answer is that it's kind of both. This is something that I really didn't notice or think about on my first watch through, but Jinx only cares about Vander when the show needs her to. During the first 3 episodes of Season 1, Vander is shown to be like a father to Jinx and Vi. Jinx doesn't get as much screen time with Vander as Vi does, but we are led to believe that Jinx and Vander have a loving relationship. This is later confirmed during flashbacks throughout the show, as well as Jinx's reaction to furry Vander.
Maybe this is like a do-over. Besides, he's your father too.
But after the time skip, Jinx's relationship with Vander kind of just vanishes. There are only 3 instances of Jinx acknowledging Vander's existence after the time skip. The first is that Jinx keeps Vander's pipe as a memento. This is admittedly a nice detail and shows that Jinx still cares. In the second instance, we actually get spoken dialogue. This is the first time that Jinx is directly talking about Vander after his death, so we should get a lot of insights into her character here.
Vander wasn't the man you thought he was.
Right. He was like a brother to you, and he turned his back, and blah, blah, blah. Did I miss anything?
I've got a new one for you.
I'm sorry. What? That's it? That's all we get? Jinx is quite literally hand-waving away my precious character development. Where are the insights? Jinx, you may have heard this conversation a million times, but I haven't. This moment is treated with so little importance. They just move on to something else. But how does Jinx feel about Vander? Why does she seem to not care about him at all now, to the point of literally being bored when his name comes up? How does she feel about the fact that Silco kidnapped Vander and forced her into a situation where she accidentally blew up all her friends? If Silco manipulated her into believing that Vander wasn't the person she thought, how does she reconcile that fact against the person who raised her? She went from having Vander as a father to working for his killer. This should be a core conflict of her character. Arcane loves drama, so why skip over the meaningful stuff? I want to learn things. And the final instance of Jinx talking about Vander is honestly just a joke. To get there, we have to wait all the way up until episode 9. Jinx captures Vi, Silco, and Caitlyn so that they can all have a nice chat. While talking with Vi, Jinx says this.
He took everything from us. Right here, he stabbed Vander in the back.
And that's it. We just move on. I would have thought that Vi would have a thing or two to say if Jinx didn't, but I guess not. Just a throwaway line to acknowledge that Jinx knows Silco betrayed Vander now. So we don't learn anything meaningful in Season 1, but what about Season 2? Oh boy, am I glad you asked. At the start of Season 2, when Jinx is giving her send-off to Silco, she says this.
Wannabe street thugs squabbling over scraps. Just like when Vander shoved off.
Shoved off? Shoved off? Your father died trying to save you and your family. The father that you supposedly loved and cared about at one point. And you are referring to his death as him having shoved off? That's what you would say about a friend who took your money and left for Vegas. And she's talking about him as if this was just some random act of nature when she already acknowledged that Silco was the one that killed him. How did we get from a loving family during the first few episodes to Vander shoved off in this episode? How did this happen? I thought you kept his pipe. Did you throw it away? I feel like the character development goblin keeps coming in to bash the back of my head with a lead pipe in the hopes that I won't remember anything. But even if you find it completely fair that Jinx would hate or not care about Vander by this point, why don't we look at the rest of Season 2? In Season 2, Episode 4, Jinx gets cornered by what she assumes to be a monster. That's when we get this clip. Immediately after this scene, Jinx is the world's best daughter again. She goes straight to Vi to ask for help, refers to Vander as their father, and does a group hug with the gang. She even screams, "Don't hurt him," when Vi starts fighting.
Don't hurt him!
Roll clip, please.
Don't hurt him! Just like when Vander shoved off.
So, just to be clear, Jinx cares about Vander just long enough for his death to be traumatic, but then doesn't care about Vander when she's working for Silco, and then cares about him again as soon as Vander is reintroduced. They don't take the time to write about Vander when it would actually be challenging to do so, but as soon as they can double down on petty tragedy, Jinx puts on her I Love My Dad t-shirt. Amazing. Maybe Jinx is just really into furries. Put some cat ears on Silco and then we'll see if she still cares about Vander. And to top things off, we get our self-sacrifice scene. I'm not sure why Vi picked this random girder to have a breakdown on, but it allows Jinx to save the day. That way she can go out a hero, hugging her dear old dad all the way down. Roll clip.
If I could just lay my head down and rest.
Alright, the time has finally come. That's everything I have for Jinx, so let's move on to what has motivated me this entire time. Season 1, Episode 3, and its climactic end that kicked off the entire story of Arcane. In other words, the worst scene in the entire show. Now, I know that I haven't talked about it much, but the first 2 episodes of Arcane are well written in my opinion. I did mistakenly think that Vander was beating Vi and Jinx's parents to death on first viewing, which would have made for a very different story, but that's on me, not on the show. It's only in episode 3 that things start to go off the rails. Allow me to set the scene. Vander gets kidnapped by Silco and his goons. Vi and her 2 friends go to rescue Vander, but get cornered behind this metal door in the process. Jinx, who was asked to stay at home, goes to help anyway. Please keep in mind that the reason given as to why Jinx should stay at home is this.
You're all I have left. I can't lose you.
Jinx arrives and sees what's going on through this little crack. This will be important for later, so remember that part. As Vi's group is finally about to escape through a hole in the wall, Jinx sends in her little bomb monkey in an attempt to blow up Discount Ezreal before he can break down the door. The resulting explosion causes a chain reaction that blows up the rest of the building. It also somehow manages to blow up the metal door first before sending out a small chunk of plot explosive to detonate inside the room. The secondary explosion sends both friends into the corner of the room, despite the fact that they were standing in different locations, where they are promptly crushed by rocks. Silco, Savika, Singed, and all of the goons that were standing right in front of the explosion are completely fine. Savika does get her arm blown off and Singed gets some burns, but that's about it. Before we analyze this explosion, I would coincidentally like to take a moment to discuss plot armor. There is a rather strange degree of plot armor that exists within Arcane. And I don't mean the nitpicky type, I mean the what is going on here type. Let's go over a few. Caitlyn is the only one to survive this explosion and is barely injured. Caitlyn shoots Savika 3 times in the arm with a sniper rifle, which is the only place that she can't be hurt. Mbessa has a scene where she is fighting Warwick, but we are never shown what happens. The show just kind of moves on. Vi leaves Mbessa the dictator trapped helplessly in a net without killing her, and it's never explained why. Echo gets shot in the one place where it won't hurt him. This explosion kills everyone except Echo and Caitlyn, despite there being no difference in where they were standing. And this point-blank grenade doesn't kill Echo or Jinx. Jinx would literally be vaporized here, but instead she just gets little baby burns. And yes, I know that Singed had to save her with Shimmer, but I'm saying there wouldn't be anything left to save. There are more, but you get the point. I'm not sure why, but explosions are more like sniper bullets in Arcane. They only eliminate the people that they need to. It's like the show thinks that because you don't see what happens directly, that leaves room for interpretation. But explosions should leave the least room for interpretation. It's very simple. Were you in an explosion? If yes, then you're dead. All of this is meant to show that when I say the explosion in episode 3 is extremely contrived, it's a pattern, not an exception. You are telling me that everyone on the outside of this metal door is completely fine, but the people inside the door are the ones that die? Because of this 1 in a million situation where the door gets blown up and a random chunk of crystal flies in at the perfect angle to send both friends into the same corner where rubble kills them and no one else? This is the only time in the whole show where a Hextech explosion results in a random chunk flying off to create a secondary explosion. So why is there a random chunk then? It's because there's no other way to kill everyone on the other side of this giant protective metal door. And you know what? I try not to point out nitpicks, but I think this one highlights something. When the explosion goes off, none of Silco's goons are visible on the bridge. But right after the explosion, they're all visible again and act like they were there the whole time. The reason I bring this up is because it shows that the writers are consciously making these choices. It's not an accident. They know that it wouldn't make sense to the audience to watch a bunch of normal goons get obliterated and then come back completely fine. I mean, just look at what it did to Savika's arm.
What?
So instead, they just instant transmission the goons away during the explosion. Then they come back and just pretend.
Oh man, what a crazy explosion that was, dude.
Anyway, we're not done, so let's move on. Vander attacks Silco, but Silco turns the tides by stabbing him. Vander then falls off the bridge and gets hopped up on purple goof juice. In monster form, Vander dies while saving Vi. This is where Jinx shows up filled with pride, thinking that she's helped. The next series of events is something that I can only describe as a parade of failure. Vi yells at Jinx and blames her for everything that happened. She also slaps Jinx in the face, so we have that for our collection now.
One dead kid? Ah! Away!
While crying, Jinx says that she was only trying to help. This is where Vi leaves Jinx to die while she begs her not to. And I know what you might be thinking. Vi didn't leave Jinx to die, she's just taking some space. My response to that would be, space? Here? In the collapsing, burning building that has murderers within walking distance. That's where you're taking space. Regardless of whether you feel like Vi intended to leave her sister to die or not. She is quite literally leaving her sister to die. This is shown moments later when Silco shows up with a knife. Even when Vi does change her mind and suddenly cares about her sister's safety again, she's too far away to do anything in time. If the script was even slightly different, then Jinx would have been stabbed to death in a back alley by Silco and Vi would have been able to do nothing to stop it. What I am trying to say is that a loving sister, which Vi's character has exclusively been shown to be up until this point, would never do this. What happened to this?
You're all I have left.
I mean, just think about your own loved one. No matter what kind of accident they caused, would you leave them behind in this circumstance? In a burning building full of murderers? Would you not save the person you love first and then take time to reflect later? TPO, Vi, TPO. The other fun little part of this scene is where Marcus the Mystery Enforcer shows up and kidnaps Vi at the exact moment she tries to run to her sister. I know that Marcus saw the explosion, but why is he showing up with the worst possible timing? For your one and only redeeming action, Marcus, you sure picked an ill-fated moment. So, with Vi out of the picture, it's only Jinx and Silco left. This is where we get the payoff to end all payoffs.
She left me?
This is not possible. Do you know the level of tomclownery that is going on here? This is not how a child would act. This is not how a human would act. I would be more likely to believe you if you told me Jinx was from the planet Blipnor and this was her alien custom. In what world, in what universe would Jinx go to give the person responsible for the death of her father and indirectly responsible for the deaths of her friends and her sister hating her a big ol' hug? Let me slow down. There are two counter-arguments that I can think of as to why this would be possible. First, that Jinx feels she's the one responsible for everyone dying, so she doesn't see Silco as evil. This is incorrect. Jinx clearly saw what was happening through this crack. Even if she didn't directly see Silco, because we're never actually shown what her point of view is, she definitely saw his goons. They were the ones that she was trying to blow up in the first place. And even beyond that, what would a bunch of goons be doing in a burning building? Jinx can put two and two together here. These are clearly the people responsible for what just happened. And yes, Jinx clearly blames herself, but that doesn't mean that she wouldn't blame Silco. Silco was trying to kill everyone. He's the literal reason they were all in danger in the first place. Even if Jinx hates herself right now, she would hate Silco even more. I mean, why even Silco in the first place? Hug one of his goons at this point. At least they didn't personally twist the knife. What's wrong with this guy? Why don't you hug him? The second counter-argument that I can think of is that Jinx is having a mental breakdown and that's why she's acting in such an illogical way. This is also incorrect. I think that the two things people tend to understand the least are mental health and children. When you combine the two, it almost acts as an anything button. A child with mental health issues could literally be capable of doing anything. They could even hug their father's murderer. We don't know. But that just isn't true. Both people that struggle with mental health issues and children are still human beings. They still act like human beings. This is just not something that would happen, breakdown or not. And if you still don't believe me, I actually have 4 friends that are all therapists that work with children. And no, I'm not kidding. I asked them if this scene from Arcane would be possible, and all of them said no. They said that a child would never act this way regardless of what struggles they were going through unless it was so severe that they couldn't understand reality. But Jinx doesn't struggle with hallucinations until after the time skip. Up until this scene, the only sign that Jinx has mental health struggles at all is a single scene where she has a panic attack. Jinx is also fully able to reason that Vi hates her and feel anger.
She is not my sister anymore.
No matter how you slice it, this just doesn't work. Now, this could make sense if Vander was a horrible person, or if Silco brainwashed Jinx over a long period of time, but we don't get that. We get instant dad, just add water. And if you still don't agree, that's totally fine. But I want to take a moment to look at this with a broader perspective. What was Arcane's goal here? The show needed Jinx to remain a sympathetic character despite joining Silco, and they needed Vi to remain a sympathetic character despite essentially abandoning Jinx. So, they have Jinx accidentally blow up all of her friends and none of her enemies, then they have Vi say it's all Jinx's fault and walk away, only for Vi to suddenly change her mind at the exact moment that she's kidnapped so that Jinx can then join Silco without worry. Jinx remains sympathetic because she was treated horribly by Vi and she thinks that Vi hates her, while Vi remains sympathetic because she changed her mind but was unable to intervene. Every scene is crafted with the intention of allowing this payoff to happen, even if the very laws of reality themselves have to change. If you combine every aspect of this scene and the events leading up to it, I think it encompasses every flaw that I've talked about. Contrivance, character inconsistency, inhuman behavior and reasoning, superficial drama created by forced interactions, and quite possibly worst of all, a cool scene that you can watch in a YouTube clip. This scene is Arcane in a nutshell, and it's a very poorly written scene. Wowza. That was a lot. I think I've shown everything that I can to support my arguments. If you're not convinced, that's totally fine. Just because something makes me angry doesn't automatically make me right. That would be stupid. And even if you did agree with some of my points, don't let that ruin the show for you if you like Arcane. It's okay to overlook flaws in something that you enjoy. I do that all the time when I consume media. I mean, my favorite movie is like Lord of the Rings. You can't really get more mainstream than that. We tend not to look for holes in stories that we like, only in stories that we don't like. I by no means think that I'm smarter than all the people that like Arcane. I just hate the writing, so I notice its flaws. And as one final thing to consider, there are any number of counterarguments that you can come up with to address my criticisms. I tried to address some of the common ones that might come up, but anything can be explained with enough creative thinking. That's what writing is, it's creative thinking. My question for you is, when does it stop being your responsibility? At what point does you explaining the story just mean that you're doing a better job of writing it than they did? I just want you to consider, when is it the audience's job to pick up on intention versus the writer's job to properly tell the story that they're trying to tell? And you know what? To end things off, I have a bit of a philosophical question for you. Can something truly be poorly written if everybody loves it? Or does that actually just mean that I have bad taste? The world may never know. Either way, I'm done screaming in the corner for now. so I'll be taking my leave. I hope you have a good day. Goodbye.